Welcome back to the Legal Insight podcast by HHQ, and today we are talking about tokenized money. This is episode 35 of our podcast, and I must say it is rather remarkable that we're already at the midway point of season 3, and I trust I speak for everyone here when I say that this journey has been genuinely fulfilling. Early mornings, coming into the studio recording, it started from a relatively small idea, just wanting to share the legal developments in a manner that makes sense to busy general counsels, directors, and legal in-house teams. And it's now grown to something far more meaningful and far-reaching than we have originally thought and imagined. Now today, we have our familiar voices, Mr. Ong Johnson and Lo Khai here again, and we'll be continuing our discussion on how financial institutions could strategically position themselves in the tokenized money economy. Welcome back to the show, guys.
Good to see you. Always happy to see you. Happy to be back.
Right. Now, this is part 2 of our discussion. In the first part, you can go back to episode 34 to watch. We explored what tokenized money is in Malaysia, and we also discuss how beyond mere issuance, financial institutions may begin positioning themselves across the broader ecosystem, including payment networks and infrastructure, as well as the merchant acquirer and merchant acceptance layer. Now, if you have missed that episode, I strongly encourage you to give it a listen before coming back to this episode. So now let's move into part 2 of the discussion. Johnson, naturally, when we talk about stable coins and tokenized deposits, we simply cannot ignore payment and settlement. And perhaps especially cross-border payments, which we broadly refer to as remittance. Why are stable coins or tokenized deposits so important in this space, and what is the real value here for financial institutions to explore?
Yeah, I love it. I may be totally biased, but personally, I think that the greatest value of stablecoin or tokenized deposits really lies in remittance. Put it that way, I really think that when it comes to e-money, especially for retail payment, e-money is almost perfect. In the previous episode, we were saying that we are able to actually buy char kway teow using e-money, and I'm able to literally get my char kway teow without any hassle. They are able to get the payment immediately as well. So I really think that the real value of stablecoin or otherwise tokenized deposit really lies in remittance due to the key element, which is they are able to transfer, they are able to transact almost immediately, which is T+0. Just a few days ago, we received an email from our client. The client was saying that they are right now arranging payment, and then because it's a client from China, so they are saying that because now this is a remittance, cross-border remittance, so they were telling us that we need to expect at least 1 month for us to receive the payment. That immediately attacks Khai. I said that is exactly why we need stablecoin and also tokenized deposit. Can you imagine how ridiculous and also how disruptive it is for businesses in order for them to wait for 1 month just for the payment to arrive to the bank account? When it comes to tokenized deposits and stablecoin, the value and the demand is well proven. When you're looking at data, it shows that the use case of USDT as well as USDC, the biggest use case, the biggest demand is always for cross-border remittance. Then in the future, let's say one day my client, they are able to actually transfer me money using tokenized deposit from China, from US, from Singapore to Malaysia. I will literally be able to receive the fund just within minutes or even within seconds. And us as a law firm, we are definitely going to embrace it. Then similarly, I know that many companies listening, they also love this idea.
Yeah, I feel like that's a really compelling proposition given the possibility of a T+0 settlement. But Johnson, whenever something appears too attractive, too good to be true, there's usually another side to the story. Now, are there any risk here for that, remittance? And is it really something that financial institutions may easily just adopt and adapt to?
Definitely. I mean, I love the quote that the biggest risk in life is not taking risk, right? So when it comes to anything that's too good, definitely there'll be risk as well. So there are always two sides to the same coin. So when it comes to remittance, even though we understand the upside, we understand how valuable the entire proposition it is, but when it comes to remittance, the risk is also definitely a lot higher comparing to just normal payment or normal settlement. Why is it so? Because once we are talking of cross-border remittance, cross-border transfer, cross-border settlement, naturally there are different aspects we have to take into account. The first one definitely is AMLA concern. The second part is forex impact. And also, when it comes to remittance, we know that you are not only dealing with BNM, you are dealing with regulators from different jurisdictions. Let's say right now, I want to receive payment from Singapore, from Vietnam, from US, or from China. When that happened, I not only need to get approval only within Malaysia, but also the other side country as well. Because remittance come both ways, right?
That's right.
So I'm able to receive money from another neighboring country. Then similarly, I'm also be able to transfer money from Malaysia to US, Malaysia to Vietnam, Malaysia to Thailand. So that is why it's a lot more complicated coming from the legal and also regulatory aspect.
That's very helpful. Now, Khai, let's look at a different category of financial institutions, those that may not necessarily want to focus so much on remittance or the payment side, whether that is, payment infrastructure, merchant acceptance, or as I said, remittance. Now, we understand that such institutions may actually look at the custody end, right, the custodian end. Could you explain what that means and how it works and why financial institutions should actually be paying attention to that?
Yeah, certainly. I actually mentioned the term custody or rather custodian in the previous episode, right?
Yeah.
For those of you who have been paying attention.
Yeah.
So this is the services layer that I have previously brought up. It essentially refers to the safekeeping and administration of digital assets on behalf of clients. So in traditional sense, it's very similar to what banks are already doing. From the trust perspective, a lot of the banks, they also have a trustee arm.
That's
right? They hold on to assets, cash, shares, or whatever on behalf of their clients for the benefit of certain someone, right? So in terms of custody, essentially the banks, or rather the custodian, they are doing the same thing. It's just that the underlying asset that is being held on trust in this case is no longer the conventional asset, the traditional assets, but rather in this case, it will be the tokenized money. We take a tokenization project, for example. You would want custodian to be there to hold on to the token that has been issued so that you can manage counterparty risk. You separate the asset that's being issued, or you separate the token that's being issued from the issuer themselves, so that if you are the investor, then you can be certain that whoever that has issued this token, whoever that is the owner of this project, will not be able to do whatever they want with regards to the particular token, right? So this safeguard, this feature, the custody feature, is there to also impart trust in the broader market.
That's right.
In a B2C scenario as well, let's say if I am an individual investor and I have purchased a lot of tokens just purely for investment purposes, and at the end of the day, all these things, they exist in a wallet, right? You may have heard of the term hot wallet before, and then there's cold wallet. Essentially, I can actually be my own custodian. I can take custody of my own assets.
Right.
But at the same time, because I'm not well versed with security, I'm not well versed with private key management, wallet management, I don't really have the necessary know-how to make sure that the way that I'm holding on to my assets are secure. So I can actually engage a custodian to ask them, hey, can you hold on to all this investment token of mine? Since you are supposed to be specialists in this area, you know how to manage them best. You know how to put in place very, very good security. So from a user perspective, this is also one of the key objective of having custodian.
Right. Now, Khai, just following up on that, you mentioned earlier that many banks already have a trustee arm, or at least they are very familiar with trust structures. Why can't they simply rely on those existing structures or the existing trustee arm? Is the custody function actually different in the sense, in tokenized money economy?
Yeah, of course, I think function-wise and concept-wise, trustee and custodian, they are exactly the same. Essentially, you are holding on to assets that don't belong to you. And you can only deal with this asset with the specific instructions of your customer, right? So concept-wise, they are the same, but technically and in practice, they work very differently. Because of the nature of tokenized money, the nature of token and nature of blockchain, all this so-called tokenized money, they don't exist in our current realm, essentially. They exist on blockchain. And when we talk about tokenized money, whoever that is holding and having the custody of the money, they are also controlling the private key that can be used to deal with the asset. So this is where technically is very, very different from a traditional trustee, between a traditional trustee and also digital asset custodian's perspective. So from a custodian, they're not only holding on to assets, but rather they need to have the know-how and they need to have the infrastructure and the technical knowledge to know how do I manage the asset and how do I make sure that I keep the private key safe and secure. Essentially, management of the private key itself. So from a technical and technological perspective, it requires, I would say, slightly more from the institutions themselves.
Thanks, Khai. Now, Johnson, since we're on the topic of tokenized money, at the same time, we're already hearing a great deal about tokenized capital market products as well. Are tokenized capital market products the same as tokenized money?
If you say that the concept, I would say that it's very, very similar. Ultimately, we are talking about asset tokenizations. Just the underlying asset will be totally different. I would say that the key differences will really boil out to the regulators. Because when you are talking about tokenizing money, whether you want to issue stablecoin or you want to issue tokenized deposits, the right regulators will always be DAH or BNM. Whereas right now you're coming to us say that you want to tokenize bonds, sukuk, or any other capital market products. Instead of going to BNM, instead of talking to DAH, the right regular body will always be SE. I can't remember, maybe just a few months ago, Khazanah also make a public announcement saying that they are looking to tokenize their bonds and sukuk. And then the regular body will be SC. So depending what kind of asset that you want to tokenize, since you are talking to different regular bodies, then naturally different set of rules, different set of regulations and guidelines will be applicable as well. So it's important to know what exactly that you want to tokenize. It can be land, it can be intangible asset, it can be tangible asset, it can be money, it can be really anything. So depending the underlying asset, you have to comply with different rules, different regulations, and different laws.
No, so for financial institutions that may now be interested in tokenizing capital market products, what can they actually do? Do they speak to DAH as well?
So let's say your company would really just want to tokenize sukuk or to tokenize bonds, then the right regular body is always SC. So if you ask me, the very simple starting point is certainly go and read out the very recent paper also released by SC as well to understand what is the fundamental meaning of tokenizing capital market products. And with that, you will be able to understand there are differences when we are talking of native tokens and also digital twins. Speak to a lawyer, and then you will be able to go through a proper consultation, proper engagement process with SC. Then potentially SC may actually admit you into their sandbox as well. Through that, you'll be able to tokenize your capital market products, whether it's bonds, sukuk, or other things.
Great, Johnson. Now, my question to Khai would be, what is actually the role of a sandbox here? How should financial institutions actually think about sandboxes if they are actually interested in entering the space?
Sandbox is not a new term. So I'm pretty sure that our listeners and also I think generally the public would have been very, very familiar with the term sandbox already, right? Essentially, it's a controlled environment for people to test out their innovations. But specifically in the context of tokenized money, the sandbox that we've been talking about, the DAIH sandbox, is set up and established purely for testing of use cases involving tokenized money. And hence why the DAIH sandbox exists for this particular purpose. For institutions to test out use case and also at the same time for the regulators themselves to see how tokenized money can actually exist in the financial market and perhaps facilitate the financial market and to solve real problems in the financial market. The remittance delay that Johnson mentioned just now is a very, very good example, a very, very good problem that I would think Bank Negara is very interested to know how it can be solved using tokenized money. And this is also a process where Bank Negara will see, okay, if I allow issuance and existence of and use of tokenized money, what will be the risk to the financial market, right? How can this risk be mitigated? Because whoever that wants to participate in the sandbox, they have to, very importantly, identify all the risk in relation to their use case, in relation to their initiatives, and what are the risk mitigation steps that they intend to do. So after the sandbox has run its course, Bank Negara will obviously come to an assessment and say, okay, these are all the pain points that we have identified, these are all the risk, and these are all the risk mitigation measures that we think would be effective, and does our current regulatory framework suitable to govern this new ecosystem? If the answer is no, then definitely there'll be changes in terms of policy, in terms of our regulatory framework.
Yeah.
Right. Now let's end with perhaps something a bit more candid. Now, Khai, you mentioned about, working with the regulators, and some companies might think that regulators are just extremely difficult to deal with. They don't want you to succeed, or that joining or passing a sandbox even is almost impossible, right?
Yeah.
Are regulators truly that hard to deal with? And are there any tips, from your experience dealing with regulators? Are there any tips to make the process just smoother or easier?
Yeah.
Nice.
Buy them coffee.
You're telling the regulators to be nice.
Telling you to be nice.
Yes, I think that generally the impression of people, the impression that people have about regulators is that they are scary, right? Can I tell you? Can you imagine if I tell you, hey, Zach, you need to go and see B&M. They want to see you. I think you would definitely be worried. Oh, okay, I need to go and see a regulator.
Yeah.
What should I? Yeah, correct. But in this case, actually, based on our experience dealing with both the SC and also B&M, particularly the AIH, they are all very, very nice people, very, very helpful. In fact, a lot of the times when we represent our clients with their initiatives, with their sandbox plan, the moment, or rather after presentation has been done to SC and also to B&M, and if SC and if the regulators find that there are certain things that need to be fine-tuned, or they need, they cannot admit our clients into the sandbox immediately because certain things are lacking, they will actually tell the clients, hey, perhaps you should look into this area. These are not the things that we are currently looking for. Maybe you need to fine-tune your business plan. Maybe you need to have certain things, certain risk mitigation factors or measures in place. Regulators are actually very, very helpful because at the end of the day, they also want to make sure that the initiatives and the sandbox will be a success, right? But of course, I think you cannot just waltz into the regulator's office and just tell them that I want to issue stablecoin. Tell me what to do, right? I have no plan whatsoever. Obviously, then regulators are not going to entertain you.
Yes.
So if you ask me for tips in a sense, I would say the best tip is to be ready. You need to first do your homework. If you know that you want to participate in a sandbox, come up with a business plan. Speak to the right people, speak to your consultants, speak to your lawyers, form your team, and then have a formulated business plan, do all the homework, fill up all the forms that the regulators would want, then only you go and see them. So that the engagement with the regulators will be one that is meaningful rather than one that is one-sided. You go to B&M, you go to regulators and tell them that, hey, I just want to do this and tell me what you want. Obviously, that's not going to work.
Yeah, to put things in context, to be honest, the whole process is very similar to fundraising. So, in order for you to do fundraising, you'll be doing tons of homework, right? You don't just go to a PE or VC, say that I want money, and then just give you fund. You'll be preparing very, very good presentation. You will formulate your entire team. You'll tell them what is the market lacking, and then how can I add value to you? How can I add value to your company by investing in my company? Then similarly, the moment you're engaged, you want to actually speak to B&M or otherwise SC, you should also be fully ready. You are speaking to them, say that, look, I have done my homework, and then we are ready. We will actually want to work very closely together, and then this is our shortcoming, or this is our strength. So how can we work together? How can we explore things to really succeed in our sandbox?
In this case, in the AIH sandbox, regulators would definitely want to see what kind of real problem are you trying to solve with this innovation. Are you just issuing stablecoin? Are you just issuing tokenized deposit for the sake of issuing? Like we have mentioned just now, the issuance of the token itself is only the first step. I think there are a lot of other underlying layers, other infrastructure surrounding this, which are meant to be solving real problems, which the traditional fiat money cannot be solving, right? So in your presentation to the regulators, you need to identify the problem that you're actually trying to solve.
Thanks, that's really clear. And also regulators are taking on risks working with whoever they're choosing to work with. So they have to know what kind of risk that you're aware of as well. Now, gentlemen, this has been an excellent discussion. I think the two-part conversation in episode 34 and 35 has made it very clear that tokenized money is not simply a story about issuing a stablecoin or tokenized deposits for the sake of it. It is a much broader ecosystem involving infrastructure, merchant acceptance, remittance, custody, and increasingly wider tokenization of other financial products as well. Now, banks, financial institutions that understand the broader architecture they are likely far better position than those that look at this only at the product level.
Yeah.
So for anyone listening who would like to understand more, please do feel free to reach out to our partners, Johnson and Khai. As many of you would already know, they frequently advise on fintech, digital asset, and tokenization matters. And they're always very generous with your time when it comes to sharing perspectives with boards, senior management teams, and institutions trying to make sense of where the market is heading. And from what I understand, they will almost likely never say no to a good coffee meeting, provided the coffee is good. Now, thank you for joining us at the Legal Insight podcast by HHQ. We'll see you in the next episode.